But before we get started, big thanks to Terrence, our top donor. You're so awesome. We really appreciate it. Also, thank you to Alexander, Gregory, Bert, Artigus, and Fernando. We really appreciate the contributions, and if you would like to help us continue adding features to our free and open source plugins, I'll put a link to the Emberlight Patreon in the description. Hello, and welcome back to Humanizer, our free and open source 3D character creator for Godot 4. It's based on the MakeHuman program and MPBF2 plugin for Blender. So some exciting news. MakeClothes is now integrated with MPBF2, so you only need the one download, and it's a bit easier to use. So I just wanted to quickly show you how to import your assets from the new MakeClothes in MPBF2 into the Humanizer plugin for Godot. So I'm not going to show you how to set up either one, but I will put links in the description for installing Humanizer and MPBF2 plugin for Blender. So if you need help with that, check in the description. And I'll put a link to the Humanizer repository in the description as well. So once you have the latest version of MPBF2 installed in Blender, you'll want to open up your clothing mesh, and I'm just going to resize this. And you'll probably also have a material for your asset, but the Humanizer doesn't actually use the MHMat resource that MPBF2 generates. It just uses the file naming conventions on your textures, and I'll show you how to set that up. And I also don't actually know how to use the MPBF2 material creator. I'm not sure if it just doesn't work but you can just pretty much ignore the material for now. Then you'll want to open up the MPBF2 tool dock and create a new human from any of the options. So here's our human, and then you'll want to move the mesh to fit the body, and you can move these vertices around as needed. Keep in mind, if you end up scaling the mesh, you'll need to apply the transform or else it won't export. And then with the cube selected, you'll want to go to Create Assets, and under MakeClothes, there'll be an object type. So currently it's type None. You'll want to set the type to Clothes, or you could select one of these other options. I'm not sure if they actually work though, so I'll just be using Clothes, and change the type, so now it says current type Clothes. And on your human, if you select that, under the MakeClothes tab, you can see this says current type base mesh. So if it's not already selected, you could select the base mesh here for the human. Now with the cube selected, you'll want to click on the triangle for the vertex groups and add at least one. So I'll name it helper tights. And this name needs to correspond to one of the vertex groups names on the human mesh. So I think it's up here. Here's the helper groups. So there's a skirt if you're for like the bottom of the dress, if you're making that, and there's a hair helper if you're making hair. So generally the helper tights works pretty well for most clothing, so that's the one that I'll recommend, and you can try the other ones. Then you'll need to make sure that all of the vertices are in one and only one of these vertex groups that correspond with the human. So these are the group of vertices that it's going to build your MH clothing file from to set the positions of the vertices. So you'll go to edit mode and select all vertices or whatever subset, and then click Assign to the helper tights. So now all of your vertices are in the vertex group. And you can have multiple vertex groups here, but just make sure that each vertex is only assigned to one group and there are no vertices that are unassigned. Then there is a delete group option. So you'll want to, you don't have to add the delete vertices if you don't need them, but generally speaking, sometimes the clothes will clip, or the skin will clip through the clothing, and that's where the delete vertices are crucial. But I can hide all of these vertices under the cube, and that will reduce the number of vertices that the engine has to calculate, so it's good for performance as well. So if I select my human and my cube, I can interpolate a delete group. So we'll go ahead and run that. And so now if you check the human, you can select the delete vertices. So this is because we're not really using a proper clothing. You would have many more vertices to build from, so this just takes the ones that it used to build from, basically. And so it didn't really select the ones we wanted, which is fine. So you'll just want to, I'll just remove all of these and then select some from the middle, so you can obviously make this more accurate. But so now we have a group of vertices, and don't want to do that. So then you can assign these to the delete vertex group, which was created on the human mesh whenever we clicked create delete verts. So you can modify that vertex group however you need. Now we can go back to object mode and select the cube again. So in Humanizer, we use the tag to specify which slot the clothing will take up. And if you want it to show up in the menu, you'll need to add the slot tag. So this will be on the torso with a capital T. And if you forget this or need more tags, you can edit the MHClothes file later, so I'll show you that. So don't worry if you forget that. And then I'll name this, so this will be the test cube. And then, so that's pretty much everything you need to do. Now make sure you have both of your objects selected. And we're gonna save as files. And you'll pretty much want to, so you'll save this in your asset directory in your project. So now it has saved this as a MHClothes file. So that's all we need to do in Blender. So now MPBF2 has generated the MHClothing file and OBJ that Humanizer needs. You can ignore the MH material or copy it over if you want. And you'll probably also want a texture. So for the albedo, make sure that it's named _diffuse.png. I don't think JPEGs are working, so you'll just want to use a PNG. And of course, you'll want to have set the UVs up in Blender previously and made this texture, probably with the texture painter. You just need to export it to an external file. So you'll copy these 3 files over to a working directory that already has Humanizer installed. So you can see here, we have Humanizer plugin. And then You'll probably want jolt as well for the physics, but it's not necessary. So you'll want to make a new folder in the root directory or wherever in your project. I'll name it assets, but you can name it something else. And then you'll want to, so the file structure in this folder does need to have the correct names. So you'll need clothes and body parts. And if you go to the Humanizer plugin, assets, you can see these folder names. So this is where it will be looking for assets. And you need to mirror that structure in your local assets folder. So now in the clothes, the subdirectories don't need any specific structure, so I'll just make a new folder for the test cube and paste in my 3 files here. Also, this MHClothes file is plain text, so you can just open it up in any text editor. You'll see it refers to the obj name, and then it has the vertice building and delete verts lists. So this just triangulates the vertice position, the vertex, and the scale. So I can see that it did not save my tag, which is unfortunate, but all you need to do is type tag torso, and now it will equip to the torso slot. And you can add additional tags for the legs or whatever else you want it to cover. And you can also have a normal and ambient occlusion textures. So if you look in the add-ons data folder, you can see that the female casual suit has a diffuse texture, an _AO for the ambient occlusion, and an _normal for the normal map. So just make sure that you have those files named correctly if you want to include them. Now you can open up your project in Godot, and first in the project settings you'll want to open up the Humanizer global script, and in the config you'll want to make sure that your new folder is included in the paths dictionary. So you'll just add an element and add the folder name like that and save that. So you'll probably want to make this resource unique and save it as its own, so you can just drag it back in, because when you update you will have to re-add this when you update the plugin. Then you'll want to make sure that the Humanizer node scene is closed, and then so that it doesn't have any resource conflicts. And then under Project, Tools, Humanizer, you can select Import All Assets, which will generate all of the files from your new folder. And I think there's a way to individually import assets as well, but this works too. Then once it's done importing, you can open up the authoring scene or any other Humanizer auto-updating Humanizer node, and you can see in the closed drop-down under the torso that the test cube is there. So it has the texture on it, and you can see that it does change with the shape keys. However, the mesh is very deformed, and this is a problem because the cube is meant to be static, essentially. It's supposed to keep its shape, whereas clothing would bend. So it's a slightly different, but basically this will work for most clothing. It will look fine. But you can see here that if I remove the skeleton from the asset, that now it's pretty much a cube. So what's happening is it's assigned to the incorrect bone weights, and so it's being pulled down by the bones. So I'll go ahead and show you how to fix that if you're trying to make a rigid asset. So if I open up the project in Blender again, and under the human, you can see that there are the joint vertex groups, which are just cubes on where the bones connect. So we have these spine groups, and basically I want the cube to rotate with the hips and to stay pretty much rigid. So you'll want to select a small group of vertices around the center. And if you go to the modifiers on the human mesh, you can actually disable the hide helpers modifier here. And then if I go to wireframe and edit mode, then you can select the joints to see where they are. So the joint 1 is up at the top, the joint 4 is down at the bottom. So this seems like a good candidate. Typically you'll just want to use 3 vertices, and you can do that for a rigid object. You can just add more vertex groups to the base human mesh and refer to that, so that is an option. But since this is already here, I'm just going to use joint spine 4. So under the cube, go back to object mode and re-enable the helpers. So then I can rename this to spine joint 4, joint spine 4, yes. So I'll just rename the vertex group to joint spine 4, I think. Yes. Okay. And they're already assigned, so you can see. And then just want to select both. Another option would be to assign these corners to like the right shoulder and left shoulder and the bottom to the feet or something, which would create a different effect, so you can have the multiple vertex groups. But just for this, we'll select both and then save as files. So we don't need the dot blend. And I'll just make a new copy of this. And then you'll want to paste those into your assets. So I'm just going to keep both versions. You would probably just want to overwrite it though. But as long as the MHClothes points to the same OBJ and it has a different name, then it will use the same texture, so that's useful. And then once you've re-imported the assets to your project, you can see that there's 2 versions, so the old one and the new one, with the proper vertex group set for a rigid asset. So, and of course, when you adjust the shape keys, this will adjust as well. So there's a lot of settings in MakeClothes, and you'll have to look up some documentation on the original program probably to become proficient with it, but between those 2 techniques, you should be able to get most things looking pretty decent. So that's how you import assets from the new MPBF2 MakeClothes plugin, which has been integrated, as I said. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll try to help you. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.